Thanks for catching that. I thought I already had started, Abby. Thank you. Okay. And now I will pass it over to Addie to introduce our guest speaker for today.
Yay! Thank you so much. I apologize for being late. I had to bike home from my grade 2 class today, so it was a little hairy, but I did not get caught at any red lights. So we are joined today by David Katzel, who will be talking about seed saving in our garden today. So David is super amazing. We've had the opportunity to work with him at Farm Folk City Folk a few times this year, and every time he speaks, I'm just so excited about seeds. So I'll do a little more of a bio right before he starts, but I am really stoked for all of you to hear from him today. We're also going to be going over our agenda on the next slide. Thank you. So we'll just be doing a quick intro, and then David will be sharing about 3:30, talking about seed saving, which is so fun to do with your students in the garden. It's a super interactive way to engage with the garden. We're also going to be giving you some tips on extending your season, because we need our garden to continue producing into the fall, because that's when our students are back. Also some harvesting tips, and then we'll be having our breakout rooms at the end, and you'll be able to choose what breakout room you'd like to join, one of the 3 topics here. So you can kind of think as we go through the presentation what you'd like to learn a little bit more about, and we'll have our closing. So we end today at 4:30. So before we get into our agenda, I just wanted you to take a deep breath in and out. Remember, you are not doing this work alone. If you have been with us since January, I can't believe this session's been going so long. You know that this is not going to work. This is not on the back of one person, one teacher, one educator, one person in a school garden. You have yourself, and you also have other people. They want to help. You've started your school garden committee, hopefully, fingers crossed. And if not, you can rewatch our sessions from the spring. That you have your colleagues around you, you're working with your students on the land, and there's also this big community around you. The schools are not, we kind of get stuck in our own little schools. We think it's this own little bubble, but there's all these other neighbors, associations, there's lots of other people in our community that we can lean on. And sometimes we need to know how to ask for help and when to ask for help. And there's no shame in that. And there's no shame, anywhere, because Brene says we got to talk about it. So what does your garden look like now? I'm so curious. Maybe your garden looks like this. You have all this amazing fruit. The irrigation works super well. You have no weeds. Everybody showed up for their work shifts, and you have a ton of food. Awesome. But now what? I have heard of so many horror stories of people harvesting food, and then they put it in the corner of their gym and it got too warm and everything rotted. Or you're not harvesting your tomatoes fast enough and you got frost. I have done all of these things. I've been gardening for over 10 years, and all of these things have happened to me. Like these tomatoes I picked from my garden, and then I was too tired and I just let them all go to waste. So maybe everything worked and you have a lot of things. So you'll be very excited to hear about our harvesting tips. Or maybe your garden does not look like this, and maybe you let your chickens into your garden and they destroyed your entire kale harvest in one afternoon. There's always something that doesn't work, something you mess up, some pest that got in there, some sort of creature, I don't know. But there are lots of reasons why your gardens aren't overflowing with abundance. So what is your favorite thing? You can share in the chat. What is your favorite mistake that you have learned a lot from in the garden? I'm so curious. I'll let the mistakes pour in. Sonia, letting everything go to seed because it looks pretty, for sure. I did that with all my arugula, and now there's arugula everywhere. It's too much. Planting too much. Yeah. Stinging nettle in the greenhouse. Oh no. Oh, don't letting the cauliflower and broccoli get too big. Gets woody for sure. Letting the radishes bolt. Erica, you'll be stoked for our seed saving. I know section because that's super fun. You know, I always put way too much in my garden. Mixing lemon, cucumber, and pickling cucumbers in a bucket. Okay, David, that's like only a you problem. As a seed saver's nightmare.
It could happen to all of us.
I'd be like, that's fine. Getting to know which plants survive the droughts. Oh, for sure. New climates, new gardens, like different parts of your school field might be shadier or less sunnier than you expected. Overwatering squash. Oh yeah. Powdery mildew. Oh, you have a new lesson in seed starting, putting flowers and seeds into the compost. That sounds like fun. You can guess what it is. So that's what's fun about gardening. You make a mistake, but you learn. And there's always something that will be different next year. Planting tomato starts in the compost for sure. Marcus, you're going too fast on mine. I know you're trying to. I want to show everybody. Thank you. So we had a corner of our property and we were experimenting with sunflowers, and I was like, this is so great. I just like love sunflowers, are my favorite. So I sprinkle them everywhere. But maybe you have a problem, like letting the radishes bolt, like Erica mentioned, or having things come up and you're not really sure what they are. But now you have all of these sunflower heads and you're not really sure what to do with them. But David is going to tell us and will show us all of the fun things that you can do with those seeds that you have in the garden. All right, so we're going to do a real quick check-in. Show me with your hands, if your video's on, how much food you have with your garden. So if you have a lot, fill your whole screen. If you have a little, just show me a little. If you're kind of medium, go like halfway. Turn on your cameras. Aaron, awesome. Tessa, stoked. Charles, sweet. Amy, excellent. Vicky, sweet. Amy, awesome. Patty, you're just raising one hand. Show me a scale. Is it full? Are you full? Naomi, you got a little bit. Awesome. No, you got to get the angle. Sorry. All right. Now in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being like not super awesome, how are you feeling about your garden? Or 3, you're like, this is amazing. It works super well. Now I have a new host of problems, but I'm really stoked. Or 2 is like, I feel pretty good. Awesome. Thank you, folks. So there's going to be a whole bunch of reasons why people feel different ways. It might be your garden didn't quite live up to your expectations. Things didn't work as well as you hoped. Or maybe they worked too well and you're dealing with that. Or maybe everything was amazing, in which case, awesome. But I find that never happens with gardens. Nothing is great. I'm feeling like 1 about my home garden. I had every single disease that you could possibly have on every vegetable, and I had 2 zucchinis all summer. It was ridiculous. It's not enough. Okay, great. So we are going to move into our seed saving, and David is going to make you feel so wonderful about seeds and super stoked if you have any seeds in your garden. So David started his farming career in Vancouver, working with the Environmental Youth Alliance, and he ran gardening programs for youth out of the Cottonwood and Strathcona community gardens. He had the opportunity to experiment with seed growing, breeding, low-till annual production, intercropping, companion planting, while he worked with the Glorious Organics Co-op in Aldergrove. And he's taught a whole bunch of different workshops: gardening, composting, permaculture, and seed saving. He really loves learning directly from the soil, seeds, plants, and children who are part of his farmscape. And he looks forward to bringing his enthusiasm about seed growing to producers and consumers across BC. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, David. Yay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that intro, Addie. I'm actually probably not going to talk a lot about seed saving and get into any nitty gritty. I'll just mention we kind of reached out and got in touch with Farm to School as Farm Folk City Folk because we saw a need within school gardens. We saw amazing groups doing gardening work with schools, bigger and bigger, more robust gardens. And thanks to some of the programs like Farm to School runs, things like maintenance, summer maintenance schedules and plans so that the gardens are successful. And so what we saw missing though was seed saving in the curriculum. And so what we have been doing is sort of experimenting and workshopping and piloting a seed stewardship project with Farm to School. And mostly just getting really great feedback from the teachers and the people in Farm to School to figure out how to do it better in the future. And kind of like your garden, I always tell people when they farm or garden, you have to learn to embrace failure because as Addie said, it will happen every year. And all those fails are there. It's great in a school setting because they're potential lessons. And we knew going into doing some of these pilot projects and workshops that we would need to revamp them and change them as we go. And we've been learning lots as we did it. So you can go on to the next slide. And I just want to talk a little bit about why are we doing the seed saving work and what are we saving when we save seeds? And I'd like to just suggest we're saving a lot more than just the seeds. And often the students see a seed and they grab it and stick it in their pocket and it's like their thing that they've held, that they've now got. And we really want to impart that they're saving more than just the one variety for themselves. We preserve, when we teach kids to save seeds, we preserve culture, we preserve knowledge and experience about seed saving. And even if the seed saving isn't, 100%, or it's not, we don't save amazing seeds, we still always adding to diverse germplasm because we have more people saving seeds. So this little diagram on the right here, it just shows, this is back from the 80s, but it shows different crops and how many varieties used to be listed in seed catalogs in the early 1900s compared to what you find 50 years later. This was 1983, and not much has changed today, but there are people reaching into some of those old varieties and working with them again. So hopefully we're bringing more diversity, or at least maintaining diversity into the future. We'll skip to the next slide. And so why are seeds important? Well, I mean, for one, more than 90% of the food we eat relies on seeds. Everything in your school garden, I'm assuming, probably came from seeds. But in our current society, we treat seeds as a commodity. It's a crop that you buy from a store, or you save and sell, or you save and trade. But for a lot of Indigenous folks and people we interact with, they really don't see seeds like that, and they never have. Seeds are ancestors to them. They were part of their community. They're ancestors that need to be cared for so that they can in turn care for us. And I like to tell kids and anybody that when you're saving seeds, you actually have this opportunity to be a bridge between the past, present, and future. So we take seeds from wherever we get them from, and they've come from 10,000 years of agriculture, and they've been passed down through many hands and many generations. And we get them for one season, and we need to take care of them and look after them and hopefully make them even better than they were. And then we need to make sure that they're passed on to people in the future. So just like Addie, you don't want the produce from your garden rotting in the corner of the gymnasium. We don't want to save seeds, stick them in kids' pockets and have them go through the wash and end up at home. We want them to be distributed, and we want the kids to feel a part of that system and part of that distribution. And maybe in 10 years, they'll see a packet of seeds in some seed library that started from their school, and so that's kind of what we're really hoping to pass on with these workshops. Next slide. So yeah, so what we say is we're not teaching seed saving, we're teaching seed stewardship. And seed stewardship is a bit different. It's the process of saving seeds with the purpose of maintaining or improving the seed's health and resilience. And it also includes the act of saving and selecting a variety over many seasons with the goal of passing it on. Or maybe you only save it over one season, but you pass it on to somebody else that's going to be stewarding it in the future. So yeah, so there's some pictures here of some seeds. On the left are actually potatoes. Those are true potato seeds. So if anybody's ever experimented with that, that's a fun thing to do with a school group. There's a group of kids cleaning seeds with screens, and then those are beet seeds on the right-hand side. And the last slide. So just, you know, basic things to consider if you have a school garden program, and you're thinking that some seed stewardship work might be possible. Just some basic things to keep in mind. You have to have a summer maintenance program. Most of these seed crops are growing through the summer, and they need at least watering through the summer so they're looked after, and so that when kids come back in September, there's actually something there. You need to think about the amount of space you have. Some crops, you know, corn, you need, ideally you would save from 100 plants. And so you'd need at least a 10 by 10 plot, which, you know, some schools might be able to accommodate, but typically what I've seen is a very small sort of 4 by 4 bed given to a class. And that's fine. You can still save things like lettuce, beans, peas, tomatoes, cucumbers. But then you also need to, if you're in a garden with a whole lot of other garden beds, and maybe you're working with one class, but all the other garden beds are being looked after by some other classes, you do need to coordinate and know what other crops are growing close by. So if you're growing a tomato and there's another tomato right close by it, there is a chance that it'll cross with one another and that what you save won't be the same thing you're hoping to save. So a little bit of coordination with the other gardeners in the garden. You probably need a place to dry the seeds well. And again, doesn't need to be a huge space. We're not talking about a barn. These are small gardens. So as long as there's some place in the classroom to put a screen and dry seeds on, and then some storage and distribution plan. So just like I always tell farmers, don't plant a crop until you know where you're going to sell the crop. Don't start saving seeds until you have a plan, you know, a distribution plan for them. And I will admit that we didn't do that with the workshops, but we were connecting with lots of seed libraries. So that is the eventual plan with those seeds. So that's my brief presentation. And I thought maybe we could just, I think if there's time for Q&A. And Addie, you mentioned that I could leave, but I am happy to stay. If you want me to be part of the breakout room for seed saving, I'm happy to do that. But either way. Yeah, and I'd just be curious to know who here does some seed saving with their in the school in schools.
Oh, Erica does. Yay.
Nice.
Yeah, we're on year 2, so I've got marigold seeds from the past 2 seasons actually, and we're collecting again pretty soon. And we've not had a lot of plants put out enough produce to make seed, but when we find some, we do keep it. And I've got a really nice set of shelves outside my door now ready for collecting everything and when we harvest it in the next little bit. So
Nice.
we should have a good little crop to go with the rest of the stuff we have from the past year. So
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Erica.
Colquitt saved seeds as well. We've got peas, beans, lettuce. We've tried some tomato. Biggest problem is trying to keep things separated though. But and we've also been saving some purple sprouting broccoli to see what comes, recognizing we may not be getting pure seed as a result, but that's just an internal experiment to see. We've been planting our own seed rather than sending that one forward because it may well be not the same as what we started with.
Which is a great experiment and a great lesson for the kids. You know, like just label that seed, and it's an amazing opportunity to observe, you know, genetics right there in the garden.
We did one better than that, actually, David. We had one broccoli plant set aside and tied off to collect the seed, and never actually got around to collecting the seed. And just over the last 2 weeks, I've looked, and we have got a whole pile of seeds germinated underneath it. So it's done the job by itself.
Nice. Looks like Emmy. There's a question there.
Oh, hi. No, I just wanted to share that we're saving seeds in Haida Gwaii,
Nice.
and lots of lettuce, of course. And I'm experimenting with in my home garden with my class with dahlia seeds, which is a very interesting genetic experiment because one mother plant can produce an infinite variety of flowers the following year. And so that's something that we're working on right now with our bees and pollination unit. So
Nice. Are you saving the seeds from dahlias or the tubers, the seeds?
and then we save the tubers from the varieties that we like. the
Yeah.
following-
The neat thing about dahlias or any crop that's reproduced through cuttings or asexual reproduction, like the potatoes, is once you have something you like, you have it. You don't have to worry about it crossing out again. Yeah.
And you can share the tubers, which is quite lovely as well,
Yeah.
which we'll do. And each student can choose the variety that they are most drawn to.
Nice.
So it's, yeah, it's great.
That's so fun. That feels like a good harvest party, like goodie bag. Like, here's a tuber for you and you and you. Marcus, did you want to share something?
Yeah, David, I was wondering if you could share with us a couple just like really easy crops that kind of a beginner teacher could do seed saving with.
Okay, I mean, I think we've heard them here, like peas, beans, lettuce, tomatoes, often. Yeah, those are sort of some of the main ones. Ideally, the things like when you start digging into it, yeah, flowers, marigolds, calendula, and again, you know, if you don't worry about the crossing or keeping varieties pure, somebody mentioned kale, you can have a whole lot of kales and let them cross and see what happens over time. What I'd encourage people to do is if you're radish and fava beans, yeah, nice. Well, I'd encourage people to, when you plant seeds and when you are looking for a variety to plant, look for a story, look for a seed that has a story that you can plant. Or if it doesn't, if it's those marigolds that you've been planting for a number of seasons, you know, add a story to that marigold as it travels, like a story about how it grew one year or something, just so that there's some stories that carry with the seeds, not just the seeds themselves.
I like that idea. I think seeds tell a story. We kind of forget that. My favorite ones are these orca beans.
Oh, nice.
But they're like my very visual reminder to myself of balancing that I need, you know, I have to balance. They're like yin and yang symbols. They're not that tasty. Like they don't look that pretty when you eat them. So I just like Erin, did you want to share something?
Oh, I have a story that I share with the students in terms of the tomatoes that I grow. And it's called Radiator Charlies, which are a big beefsteak tomato. And it dates back to the 1930s in, I think it's West Virginia. And this guy who was a mechanic had the shop at the bottom of the hill and used to repair all the radiators in the 90s. Cars that couldn't make it up the hill. Anyway, his sidekick was that he liked to grow tomatoes, and over years he would grow them, choose 6, and over about 5 to 10 years he got to the point where his tomatoes were known all around the area. And as a result of it, he managed to sell his tomato plants in the 1930s for $1 a transplant, which is amazing considering what they are now. And the proceeds from selling all of his tomatoes, he managed to sell off his mortgage. And that's where you get the name Radiator Charlie Mortgage Helper from. And it is a lovely full beefsteak tomato. So that's a story to share with the kids anyway.
I love stories like that. And as I dig into more and more seed stories, one thing I'd like to share is that usually the stories that come from like the settler community are usually tied to people and a person that's done something with the seeds. And stories that come from Indigenous cultures are usually tied more to maybe a creation story, something that goes way further back and isn't necessarily connected to a person. Some of the stories about corn and where corn came from they're just beautiful. You know, it's not like this person brought the corn from here. It's the corn was given to us. And I think in one culture, the term for swaddling a baby is the same for like covering the corn with the husk or something, you know, like it's really ingrained into the culture. And I think that those kinds of things they're important to share with kids. And by no means that means don't share those other stories and where those came from. And but yeah, just highlighting that.
That's really cool. I like that insight. Erica, do you want to have one more question and then we'll move on to?
Yeah, actually, one of the biggest ones for me is what are your recommendations for storing? Because we have some rather hot and humid classrooms. We have refrigerators. Like, what kind of container works the best in the long run, and what kind of storage location would be a good idea to help ensure the seeds are good for the next season?
Yeah, so generally, you know, somewhere that has a fairly consistent temperature that's dry. In a classroom, I know if the one class I was working with had some rodent problems, so they were losing seeds to that, so it has to be rodent proof. And yeah, beyond that, sometimes you can only do as best as you have. So if you don't have you know perfect conditions, you just find the ones that are as best as they are in the school setting. We'll be doing some work with seed libraries in the near future. We're doing a virtual webinar series in November about seed libraries. So we'll probably talk about some of the, you know, ways that you can store and save seeds.
This is so fun. Thank you. It looks like there's some cool books that folks wrote the name down to in the chat as well for more detail on this. Well, thank you so much, David. You're welcome to stay on, or if you want to go check emails and then come back at 4:10 will be our breakout. So
Okay.
Whatever's up to you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to do a little session now on season extension. So season extension really can mean two things. We're talking about it right now is extending into the late fall, potentially into the winter, but it can also mean on the other end of things, getting stuff into the ground earlier or starting seedlings indoors, which we discussed earlier. So, but we're going to, for the sake of this one, talk a little bit more about season extension throughout the fall. So just some things to consider when wanting to look at how far you're going to be able to extend and keep your crops in the ground is obviously your first frost date. So certain crops can withstand that more than others. Like a lot of your cabbages and things like that, they can withstand it. Squashes on the vine can withstand it, although their leaves will die back. But things like tomatoes, peppers, even beans and stuff, a lot of these ones can get really harmed at that time of year, depending on which beans. So, so when thinking about season extension, it really is also, you need to ask yourself, am I looking to continue managing this garden moving through into the fall, or would I like to just shut it down and kind of move on from it? So do you need to have a clean garden? Is that the expectation from your garden committee or the teachers at your school? And are you wanting to eat the food at a particular event? So if you do have a lot in there, maybe you're trying to extend it to get to a certain point. You know, oh, I'd love to have kind of a Halloween party or something along those lines. And so, and then of course, doing some serious season extension, which we'll talk about with a couple slides here, it would require budget. Maybe you're going to be purchasing some items or building some infrastructure around that. Here's just a quick list of some great cold hardy vegetables. And then we added in this, this little brochure here from West Coast Seeds, which talks about planting for great fall and winter harvests. And so it's what they do a great job of, and we've used that in our own crop planning cards, is that they'll show by regions too. So for me, I'm on the coast on Vancouver Island. I can really extend the season quite long, and in some cases be harvesting straight into the middle of the winter. A few years ago, I planted some fall carrots in August, and I remember harvesting them for Christmas, pulling them up at that point, and they're actually better. So it really just depends on where you are for the ability to do a lot of this extension. So frost protection is one of the first steps in the season extension, which is just trying to avoid the incoming winter. So floating row cover, also called a remake cloth, is a really good usage of it in a number of ways. It's also great for keeping pests off. But when it comes to frost, you want to keep your plants warmer, and the remake cloth actually does that. It creates a little bit of a barrier. It's only a few degrees, but what you'll see a lot of times if you're growing for a long period of time is you might have an early frost, and it will come and it will be a singular event. And then there might not be another frost for 2, sometimes even 3 weeks later, it can be. So if you can just overcome that one frost event, you can continue growing into the late fall. Another tip that I've seen smaller agriculture do is they'll actually turn a sprinkler onto their garden overnight when they know there's going to be a real hard frost, and just having that water making contact with the leaves can also save your plants. If it's just going to be like a single event, obviously you don't want to be running sprinklers all night long, day in and day out, but it is kind of a last step effort. So a greenhouse obviously is a really great way for season extension, and there's so many different ways that you can have. We talk about greenhouses. They can just be very simple. PVC piping, similar that you see in the top right picture, only larger with plastic, or it can be obviously something much more with doors and that kind of thing, and even glass in some instances. You can bring things into your classroom. If you have a small garden and you want to continue to see those peppers become red, you can bring those inside if you've got space. One thing to watch out for when bringing plants though inside at this time of year is to bring pests into the school. I don't mean rodents, I mean pests that are on the plants that can then jump onto maybe house plants that you have in the school. So that can be, so you'd want to just check on your plants before you bring them in, especially if they're going to be in really close proximity to some of your house plants. And cold frame, which we don't have a picture of here, but that's a pretty simple way to extend beds, small beds. And one thing that it can be really nice with a cold frame, if this is something you're interested in, it's a great way to harden off plants in the spring too. You can bring them outside and they're a little bit more protected. And it essentially is a garden bed with a lid on it that can be some sort of like glass, like plastic type glass on it. Does anyone have any further questions about season extension before we move over into to harvesting? Anyone who's done their own examples of season extension at schools that they would like to share, kind of successes or maybe things that they want to warn people not to adventure into? We have a few minutes if we would like to.
When we were working on a farm a few years ago, I remember I didn't really realize that frost was like a physical thing, that like it was cold air and like landing kind of on top of the plants. And we just got a bunch of remake cloth and just put it all over the basil. And we had like the only basil at the market the next day. And it was, it was kind of last minute. We saw it was going to be cool out. And I couldn't believe that like such a simple piece of material would just physically not have that frost on top of the basil, and it all looks like garbage as soon as it gets cold. So I just went out and bought so much of it. It's a pretty affordable kind of simple solution, and it's kind of fun if you see, like, if you put it on the plants and see, oh, we didn't tuck this corner in, oh, it got some frost, and that's what happened, because it will cook your plants or freeze them, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to also point out so that's what Addie was just talking to about there is just laying it kind of flat over the bed, and you can just kind of pin it down with anything. It looks like little kind of clothespins or something like that. And then in the other way is that you can use plastic a lot too, just simple plastic, and you put these little little piping kind of systems, and there's so many different ones you can use. I've seen just even very, very simple thin wire that actually goes straight into the ground. I've seen these kind of PVC pipes that can then maybe attach on into maybe rebar that's put into the ground next to the side of the bed. So it just kind of loops right into there. And then you kind of lay the plastic over it and use just little clothespins or whatnot and tie it off at the bottom. It creates essentially like a little greenhouse in there. And it's kind of mimicking the cloche idea, which you see there in the picture, which is from like a French method of making these kind of mini greenhouses. And they still kind of do this a little bit in France too, which is incredible. But you can get these kinds of materials for quite cheap. And they're also a good item sometimes to go into partnership with another school, because the roll will be long. You might not need that much. And so you can split it up with somebody else. But setting this up is very, very easy. And especially with the plastic, you can really, really extend your season quite a long time and keep mimicking kind of summer temperatures, at least during the daytime when the sun is out, especially on kind of eggplants and hot peppers and things like that.
And you can put I was rereading Elliot Coleman's Winter Harvest Handbook, and he puts the remake cloth in the greenhouse. So it's like a double layer of protection. And so if anybody has a greenhouse, you can do both, and it'll keep it even longer.
Addie, I'll add at the school garden scale, I also do both. I lay remake and then just have the small plastic hoop. And also on the island, same as Marcus, it's amazing what you can overwinter. I've knocked all the snow off the remake before and had really healthy plants underneath. The snow also acts as an insulator. So leave it on during those cold days, wait till it warms up to knock it off, and the plants will still be alive under the remake and the plastic.
That's so wild. This snow is like an insulator. That's cool.
It reminds me of this like story of a farmers in the Yukon who were doing farming, like harvesting Brussels sprouts in snow, and the snow was acting as a insulator. It's amazing. Amazing. If there's no further questions, I'll move into harvesting. Great. Thanks. So can everyone hear me? Addie, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So excited. So my name is Sonia, and I have some farming and gardening experience. I grew tomatoes in Haida Gwaii as a greenhouse manager for a season that really sparked my interest in extending the life of things and harvesting. Right, so many memories there, because sometimes you just end up, I don't know if you can see this. Can you guys see this? These green tomatoes I have here. What happened to me yesterday was I thought the frost was coming, and I picked all of my tomatoes, and that's a few pounds of like the 20 pounds of green tomatoes I have now. So this is kind of a perfect segue into harvesting, what harvesting means, and like multifaceted components of harvesting. So next slide would be great. Thanks. So it's time to harvest, and I don't know about you, but maybe that word even like brings anxiety in my body. I'm like, oh my God, things might die and I might not get it all, but it's okay. Take a deep breath. And whenever it's ready for you is the right time to harvest, because we have busy lives. I don't know where the slides went. That's okay. We have busy lives, especially as teachers. We have busy lives. So if you find like a small window of time, that's when you're going to harvest. And that's great. And then if you don't find that window of time, rest assured that your fruit will be food for birds and creatures, and perhaps an opportunity to save seeds. So I suppose this little like takeaway from the slide is that do what works for you. Have like some grace and patience with yourself, and also with like all of the energy that's gone into this garden or this box, because there's always a learning opportunity that can come from it. I still don't see slides. Does anyone?
Yeah, sorry, Sonia, I just lost the hosting ability and then it made me not be able to share it. Okay. I got it back now. Apologies for that. That's
okay. We're flexible, like potatoes that were harvested and have gone kind of soggy. That's how flexible we are. Flexible like potatoes. Okay, great. So I have on here too, like to think ahead how you will be using that harvest. So perhaps we've been like caught in a pickle and we need to harvest tomorrow. I think as teachers and educators and family members, we are able to have the ability to think about some future logistics. So whether it's going to be, what do I need to preserve this? Yeah, still on that side. Great, thanks. What do I need to preserve this? How many humans do I need here to help me with this harvest and make it successful? Or what like self-care tool do I need right now? So maybe you just need to like plug into some Brene Brown and be like, I'm going to harvest this by myself because that's all I have capacity for. Before I move on to the next slide, I also want to mention in terms of access and capacity that many school districts have in their resource centers or resource spaces have access to processing tools. So I know I'm in school district 73 and 83. Both those districts actually have resources to a dehydrator. And then I believe 83 has resources to a whole processing kit, like canning, even I think cans or jars, sorry. So maybe tap into that or ask someone who may know about this before even extending your feelers even further than your district. That's one thing I just wanted to note there. So next slide is great. And before processing, I should mention after this presentation in the future, we will have many resources like Addie's curated a resource list, and some of those resources will include harvesting tips or links to other harvesting lessons. Okay, so processing, what is it? Well, it is all about the process of processing. So when we think of that, I think of freezing, dehydrating, canning, and eating it. That's all part of the process. All of those have their own spectrum of access as well as time and ease, but don't worry. I know, I have confidence that you can do many of these. So dehydration is one piece that like Marcus and Addie and I talked about too before this presentation, that herb dehydration often is as easy as like taking a cluster of herbs and tying an elastic band around it and hanging it up somewhere that gets airflow, or having access to a dehydrator and putting it on your lowest setting. And then you're creating potentially tea for winter, like for story time and for like a cozy evening. Or maybe you're even making little bundles to be given as gifts at Christmas time. I really think dehydration of herbs is a really easy access point there. And freezing to me is the easiest because I have access to a freezer, and I find that's like the lowest barrier of entry to me because I put on a show, listen to some tunes, I cut up whatever it is, ripe tomatoes, plums, pears, and I just stick it in a bag and freeze it. I put my name on it, or sorry, the name of it and the year so that it doesn't get lost into like the nebulous of the freezer. Because the storage is really important, which brings me to storage etiquette. Just a little note about root veggies. If you're harvesting your root veggies like beets, carrots, parsnips, please don't wash them before long-term storage. Keep their sandiness, their soil on them. It just extends the longevity. It keeps them healthier until you're actually going to use them. And Addie mentioned temperature. Well, she mentioned things rotting in a corner, and I think of temperature. Just be mindful of where you're storing things and the temperature that is best for that fruit or veggie, because as I mentioned with my flexible potato, when you bring in your potatoes into a warm classroom in the corner, they're going to turn into those like pliable, moist pieces really quickly. Okay, thanks, Marcus. Next slide, or whomever. Great. As I mentioned, there is a spectrum for time and capacity. So we might all have our process or like our process preferences. So one thing to consider, what do you have available to you as a teacher, as a school, as a district? Could you get access to a community kitchen in your region to do like a larger scale processing if that's what you have in your hands? And what capacity do you have? humans available, resources, money. Sometimes our pack is a great place to like lean on for a support project, whether it's buying jars, whether it's a fundraiser initiative, or just human time and energy. All right, next slide. Thanks. And then I just wanted to mention there is room for celebration here. I think I kind of made mention that we need to honor all the energy and time that's gone into this. So why not have a party? Sonia likes to have parties. My my coworkers know this. I like to celebrate. So why not use this as a celebratory experience? And there's learning opportunities. So for the teachers out there, there's lots of ways to attach this to curriculum. Just a few mentioned here. We have knife skills, which I don't know, I feel like would fit into ADST or foods. We have conversations about life cycles of plants. I think it'd be really fun, David, hearing you talk about stories makes me kind of start to imagine having like a recipe exchange or like a story exchange about those foods, the story of that food, the people who it's connected, like physically connected, the food brought them together, but also how it's been a connection for them in their heart. Yeah, I like that. I like that. You also have opportunities to learn about different cultures and their foods, and even maybe like Addie's slide that had that nesting of circles, there's a chance for you to lean on your community partners here. So asking for help and asking for opportunity. I think that there's just a lot of potential with a harvest party or celebration. Okay, next slide. Thanks. And finally, I thought I'd put a little plug in for fundraisers, because sometimes we have this abundance and it's great when we can offer it as a gift to the members who have been supporting these projects. But if you have like pounds and pounds of tomatoes, why not have a pasta dinner? I thought about like, why not have a spaghetti dinner fundraiser? And maybe Pat can organize it. Maybe you can invite members of the community. It's a really nice time of year to start building these connections as we're like getting into the like ebb and flow of our new classroom setting, but also like leaning into fall and a bit of slowness. Really great chance to have a bit of a fundraiser or just a gathering for people. So I just put on there popsicles, pies, canned goods. Those are 3 examples. I made up the spaghetti dinner as an example, but 3 examples of fundraising opportunities I've heard of or been a part of myself. So if you have questions about those are getting started, reach out to me or any of your animators just for some ideas or perhaps like collaboration. Oh, borscht, Emmy, yeah. And lastly, don't forget to celebrate your successes. I can't say it enough, like these are opportunities for learning and for celebration, because I strongly believe that if students are kind of walking away from this garden experience with like joy in their heart and some happiness, it is only going to incentivize them to be participating in it again next season. So that's it. We have 3 minutes, a couple minutes for questions or comments from anyone, but that's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Sonia. If anyone has a quick question, we can take that. Otherwise, we will move into our breakouts discussion. Okay, next one. Okay, so we are going to create 3 different breakout groups, and you can, we'll open them up on the side panel there. You'll see them pop up here any second now. If you're interested in going into a group to continue a discussion on seed saving, that's your interest, and go into group 1. If season extension, continuing to grow into fall, potentially the winter is your interest, join group 2. And if you're looking to learn more or share secrets about harvesting and or processing at the school, then please join group 3. We will go into these breakout rooms for about 12, 13 minutes in total, and we'll return at about, we'll return at about 4:25, so it'll be about Okay. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to see if, did anybody have anything real quick that they wanted to share that they learned in their group that really kind of surprised them or is going to be like a major takeaway? If you don't want to speak, you just want to put it in the chat, you can feel free to do that, but I just wanted to leave just a little bit of, room to feel free to share.
Can I share one thing, Marcus? Top of mind. Okay, we realized that pickles are maybe like the gateway canning tool because like for safety and security of health regulations perhaps, and kids like pickles. So we were talking about safety and how to feel comfortable doing canning with groups and realized that pickles might be the answer.
Like the vinegar style, right?
Yeah. You got it. Like the acidity. Yeah, exactly. Like there's that acid content that kind of helps us not to think about botulism. Yeah.
Anyone else have anything to share? I see something in the chat.
Oh, I just got excited. But I hadn't really thought that like each plant has a certain amount of energy, especially going into the fall. So if you're picking the young beans, like somebody has scarlet runner beans growing up their fence, so pick all the little ones and just eat them so that the plant can save that energy to ripen the other beans so that you do have time to save them, because otherwise they might not be ready in time. And you can pick the whole plant and bring it in your classroom if they aren't quite ready to save yet.
So just a couple housekeeping and announcements. Our final session for the year will be October 18th at our regular time, and this will be a focus on kind of the closing, winterizing of your garden, doing a little bit of kind of off-season planning. That's what that session will focus on.
We're also going to share a bunch of resources like Teach Food First and hands-on food resource that is about to be launched. So it's going to be really awesome that you're going to leave feeling with like lots of lesson plans until we meet again in January. Yes, that's right. We will be doing a little bit of a deep dive into some resources and having a guest speaker who will walk us through one of them. I just quickly threw this together because it's coming down the line, but our grants will be being launched very soon in the next couple of weeks. October 3rd is when it's officially going to launch, and we'll have the application process open for about 6 weeks. So it'll close in mid-November. I think it's the 15th. I don't have the specific date, but the information is going to be all on our website coming up very soon. And we'll be doing a grant writing webinar. It'll be a bit of an information session as well, and that's going to be scheduled for after school on October 20th. So keep an eye out on our social media, on our website. All this information is going to be promoted in the very near future, but I thought I would give you the inside tip since we were all going to be on the call together. And yeah, just coming back, just again, in case you missed at the beginning and you happen to be within one of these regions, please do reach out to one of your animators for support. They're there to help you. And we're at this time of year when a lot of schools are wondering, oh, should I go for a grant? Maybe I want to do a project. They're great individuals to reach out to and bounce a couple ideas off of. If you need any follow-up information regarding this webinar and the webinar series, please feel free to reach out to Addie or myself. We'd be glad to answer your questions or help you find anything that, if you're having troubles with the portal or finding the recorded videos or any of the resources, just let us know and we can help get you there. Within the portal on the website there, tons and tons of resources. And here's our social media. And if you want to sign up for our newsletter, just there's some information at the bottom there, and that gives you all the updates on grants coming out, different webinars, all kinds of opportunities such as that. And I think that Sonia has offered to stay on for a few minutes later. I know that I have to go myself in case anybody has some extra questions that they would like to just bounce off. And I know that usually what happens at this point for those who haven't stuck around is it's just kind of an impromptu discussion and people can chat. And if anyone wants a breakout room to go chat to someone else they met while they're on the call, we can do that. And